I trusted my daughter with everything. One afternoon, a nurse asked her a question that should have been asked of me, and in the quiet that followed, I realized my place in my own life had already shifted. The rehabilitation center was calmer than a hospital, but not kinder. The floors were polished to a dull shine, the kind that reflected light without warmth. Somewhere down the hall, a television murmured a daytime show no one was really watching. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. I sat near the nurse's station in a wheelchair that wasn't mine, my back pressed stiffly against the padding. My sweater was folded on my lap, sleeves tucked in neatly the way I've always done it. Old habits have a way of surviving, even when everything else feels uncertain. My daughter stood behind me, one hand resting on the handle of the chair, not pushing, just there, present in a way that felt more like supervision than support. I came here after a fall, a cracked rib, a bruised hip, nothing dramatic enough to frighten me, but enough to frighten everyone else. Enough for my daughter to insist I stay close to her just for a little while. Enough for doctors to recommend short-term rehabilitation to make sure I was steady on my feet. I told them I was steady already. They smiled politely and wrote things down. A nurse approached with a clipboard tucked under her arm. She had kind eyes and a practiced expression, the kind you develop when you speak to people who are hurting all day. She glanced down at her notes, then looked up. She did not look at me. She turned slightly and faced my daughter. "Do you feel she's ready to go home on her own? Or should we extend her stay another week?" the nurse asked. For a moment, I didn't understand what had happened. I sat there waiting for the question to finish, waiting for my name, waiting for her eyes to meet mine. My mouth opened just a little, the answer already forming in my chest. My daughter spoke. "I don't think she's safe alone yet," she said calmly. "She tends to downplay pain, and she forgets things when she's tired." The nurse nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she already suspected. I felt heat bloom behind my eyes. Not tears, not yet, just a sharp, sudden awareness. "I'm right here," I said. The words came out softer than I intended, but they were clear. The nurse startled slightly and looked at me, her expression flickering with surprise. "Oh, of course," she said quickly. "I'm sorry. I should have asked you directly." She smiled, but the moment had already passed. The answer was already recorded. The decision was already leaning in a direction I had not chosen. My daughter's hand tightened on the wheelchair handle, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me she was there. "Mom," she said quietly, "you've been through a lot. We're just trying to make sure you're okay." The nurse glanced between us, then scribbled something on her clipboard. "We'll review the plan with the care team," she said. "Safety is the priority." Safety. The words settled heavily in my chest. The nurse walked away, her shoes making soft, efficient sounds against the floor. Conversations resumed around us. Phones rang. Papers shuffled. Life moved forward as if nothing significant had happened. But something had. I sat there, staring at the counter where the nurse had been standing, my hands resting uselessly in my lap. I had not been asked. I had been assessed. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a misunderstanding, a busy nurse, a protective daughter. These things happen, but my body knew better. There is a particular kind of silence that follows being dismissed. Not loud, not dramatic. It creeps in quietly, filling the space where your voice should have been. My daughter leaned down beside me. "Don't take it personally," she said softly. "They're just being cautious." "Cautious about what?" I asked. She hesitated for just a moment too long. "About you being alone," she said. I looked up at her, really looked at her. Her face was calm, composed, the same expression she used when speaking to doctors, to bank tellers, to anyone in a position of authority. She did not look uncertain. She did not look like someone asking a question. She looked like someone making a case. I wanted to argue. I wanted to list all the things I still did on my own, paid my bills, cooked my meals, drove myself to appointments, remembered birthdays and anniversaries without reminders. Instead, I felt something else rise up, a memory, the first time she corrected me in public, years ago, a small thing, a date I got wrong, a story she interrupted to clarify. I laughed then. Now, sitting in that wheelchair, I felt the weight of every small correction stack up behind me. We moved down the hallway toward the therapy room. The wheels made a soft, rhythmic sound against the floor. I watched doors pass by, each one identical, each one closed. I felt strangely separate from my own body, as if I were observing the scene from a few steps away. When we reached the therapy room, my daughter parked the chair and stepped back. "I'll be right outside," she said. "Take your time." She smiled, reassuring. The door closed behind her. The therapist began explaining the exercises, her voice gentle and encouraging. I nodded, followed instructions, lifted my leg when asked. But my mind stayed at the nurse's station, at the question that wasn't meant for me, at the answer that came too easily from someone else's mouth. As I worked through the movements, a thought repeated itself quietly, insistently. When did this start? When did concern become authority? And why had I not noticed the moment it happened? When the session ended, I sat there catching my breath, my heart beating faster than it should have. I realized then that the fall had not been the shock. The cracked rib had not been the shock. The shock was understanding that somewhere along the way, my voice had been reclassified. Not gone, just optional. And as I waited for my daughter to open the door and wheel me back into the hallway, I knew this moment would not fade. Because once you hear your life discussed as if you are not fully present, you cannot unhear it. And nothing feels the same afterward. Before that hallway, before the clipboard and the quiet way my answer was replaced, there was a long history that made everything feel reasonable at first. So reasonable that I didn't question it. Not until it was already shaping the way people looked at me. I raised my daughter alone for most of her childhood. Her father died when she was 11, a sudden illness. One week we were planning a summer trip. The next, I was standing in a hospital hallway signing forms I barely understood. I remember holding her hand while a doctor explained things she was too young to process, and I was too stunned to interrupt. That was the first time I learned how quickly life can turn administrative. After that, it was just the two of us. We learned how to survive together. I worked longer hours. She learned to let herself into the house after school. We ate simple dinners. We talked late at night when the house finally settled. She was observant even then, not nosy, just watchful. She noticed when I skipped meals, when I sat too quietly, when I stayed up too late going over bills. People used to say she was mature for her age, responsible. I took pride in that. I thought it meant I was doing something right. As she grew older, that watchfulness never left her. It changed shape. She reminded me of appointments, told me when my shoes looked worn, suggested vitamins, corrected me gently when I mixed up a name or forgot a detail. It felt like care. When I turned 70, something shifted, not in my body, in the way people spoke to me. Doctors slowed their voices. The clerks explained things I already understood. And my daughter started stepping in more often, filling pauses I hadn't asked her to fill. "Mom, you don't need to worry about that," she would say. "I'll handle it." At first, I was grateful. After losing her father, she had learned early how to take charge. I trusted that instinct. When I tripped on a loose step 2 years ago and bruised my knee, she insisted on coming to appointments with me, sat beside me, took notes, asked questions. The doctors looked at her when they answered. I noticed it. I also noticed how easy it felt to let her carry the conversation. Grief and aging both make you tired in ways that are hard to explain. Letting someone else speak felt like relief. Paperwork came next. Forms, emergency contacts, authorization documents. She framed them carefully. "This is just in case," she said. "If you're ever too stressed, if something happens suddenly." I signed without reading every line. I had signed things before, for her school, for her first job, for her apartment lease when she was young. This felt no different. After my fall, the dynamic deepened. She drove me everywhere, spoke to therapists, organized schedules. I heard her explain my preferences to strangers. "She doesn't do well with pain," she would say. "She forgets instructions if there are too many at once." I laughed it off, told myself she was exaggerating to be helpful. Looking back, I can see how language slowly changed, from support to summary, from assistance to interpretation. I remember one appointment months ago. Before the fall, the doctor asked me a question about medication side effects. I paused to think. My daughter answered. "She's been feeling foggy lately," she said, "more tired than usual." The doctor nodded and wrote it down. I didn't correct her, not because it was untrue, but because it wasn't the whole story. I told myself it didn't matter. That was the pattern. Small moments, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. I never imagined they were being collected. At home, she started organizing things, moving items into labeled drawers, making lists, leaving notes on the counter. Medication schedule, appointment reminders, emergency contacts. I told myself, It was temporary, just while I recovered. She spoke often about safety, about planning ahead, about not wanting me to struggle the way I had after her father died. I didn't hear the warning in those words. I heard love. What I didn't see then was how often she spoke for me when I was fully capable of speaking for myself. How frequently my silence was interpreted as agreement. How easily concern became documentation. The past did not feel dangerous. That is what makes it so unsettling to revisit, because nothing about it felt like betrayal at the time. It felt like a daughter stepping up. It felt like a mother letting go of a little control in exchange for peace. And sitting there in that rehabilitation center, replaying all of it, I realized something quietly terrifying. The nurse's question hadn't come out of nowhere. It had been prepared for by months of small decisions, by habits I had allowed to form, by my own willingness to step back when things felt easier that way. I had not been erased all at once. I had been gradually rewritten. And as I sat there waiting for the next appointment, listening to the hum of the building and the distant sounds of footsteps, I understood that the past was not just background. It was evidence, and it was about to matter far more than I ever expected. The first lie did not arrive loudly. It didn't come with an argument or a raised voice. It came wrapped in reassurance, delivered gently, and that is why it took me so long to recognize it for what it was. It happened 2 days after the nurse spoke to my daughter instead of me. I was sitting in my room at the rehabilitation center, the late afternoon light slanting through the narrow window. Outside, I could hear traffic moving steadily, the sound distant and indifferent. Inside, everything felt paused. My walker stood beside the bed. My slippers were lined up neatly beneath the chair. I had folded my cardigan twice already, just to keep my hands busy. My daughter arrived with a folder tucked under her arm. She smiled when she saw me, the same practiced smile she used when she wanted things to feel calm. "I spoke with the care coordinator this morning," she said, sitting across from me. "We're all on the same page now." I asked her what page that was. She hesitated for just a moment. Then she answered, "They think it would be best if you stay a little longer, just to be safe, just to be safe." The words slid easily into the space between us. I told her I felt fine, stronger even. The therapist said I was progressing well. She nodded. "Of course you are, but progress doesn't always mean ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. She opened the folder and pulled out a paper. It was covered in printed text and highlighted sections. "This is just a care plan update," she said. "Nothing serious. It reflects what we discussed." I reached for the paper. She didn't hand it to me. I skimmed it from where I sat, leaning forward slightly. Words jumped out at me. Extended supervision, limited independent mobility, family oversight recommended. I felt my stomach tighten. "I didn't agree to this," I said. She looked surprised, genuinely surprised, or very good at pretending. "We talked about it yesterday," she said. "You said you didn't want to rush things." I searched my memory. We had talked about taking things slowly, about not overdoing exercises, about listening to my body. I had not talked about oversight. I had not talked about supervision. I told her that. She sighed softly, like someone explaining something for the third time. Mom, you were overwhelmed, she said. You were anxious. You kept saying you didn't want to make the wrong decision. That part was true, and that was how the lie worked. She took something I had said, something vulnerable, and stretched it into something else entirely. I asked her if she had told them I couldn't decide for myself. Her eyes flicked away from mine. I told them you were struggling, she said. That's not the same thing. It felt very close. A knock came at the door. A staff member stepped in with a clipboard. I'm just here to confirm we're extending your stay through next week, she said cheerfully, looking at my daughter. My daughter nodded. Yes, that's correct. I felt my chest tighten. I'm sorry, I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. Extend based on what? The staff member looked confused. She glanced down at her notes. Your daughter explained that you'd prefer more support right now, she said. Those decisions have been difficult. I looked at my daughter. She met my eyes then, and something in her expression hardened just slightly. Mom, she said gently, do you really want to go through all this again? Again, as if my question itself was a burden. I told the staff member I wanted to review the plan myself. She smiled politely but hesitated. Of course, she said, but your daughter is listed as your point of contact for care coordination. Point of contact. Another phrase that landed heavier than it should have. The staff member left the room. I sat very still. When the door closed, I turned to my daughter. You told them I preferred this, I said. She didn't deny it. I told them what made the most sense, she replied. That wasn't your decision to make. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her voice low. Mom, listen to me. You're tired. You're emotional. This isn't the time to fight the system. Fight. That word lingered. I realized then that she wasn't afraid of the decision. She was afraid of my resistance. I asked her why she hadn't let me speak for myself. She rubbed her forehead. Because every time they ask you, you get upset, and then you blame yourself. I'm trying to protect you from that. Protect. It sounded so reasonable, so loving, but it carried an assumption I could no longer ignore. That I was not capable of deciding what protection looked like. I asked her if she had documentation to speak on my behalf. She said yes. The forms you signed, she reminded me. Remember? For emergencies? This is an emergency now. That was the lie, not spoken outright, but implied in the way she framed everything as urgent, fragile, and temporary. I felt something cold settle in my chest. If this was an emergency, then I was already being treated as incapable. And if I was incapable, then nothing I said next would matter. After she left that evening, I sat alone in my room long after the lights dimmed. I replayed the conversation over and over, listening for where things had shifted. The lie wasn't that she cared. The lie was that caring gave her permission to decide when my voice stopped counting. And once that lie existed, quietly accepted and written into notes and plans, It no longer needed my agreement. It only needed my silence. That was when I understood something that frightened me more than the fall, more than the injury, more than the extended stay. If I did not challenge this now, the next lie would not sound like a lie either. It would sound like a conclusion. And by then, it might already be too late to undo. The eviction did not begin with a notice or a deadline. It began with a suggestion that sounded almost kind. It was the morning of my discharge meeting. The sky outside my window was low and gray, the kind that presses down without rain. I watched a delivery truck idle in the parking lot below, its engine humming steadily, as if waiting for instructions. I felt the same way. My daughter arrived early, too early. She stood by the window, scrolling on her phone, while I sat on the edge of the bed pulling on my shoes. She did not ask if I needed help. She did not offer. She simply watched. The care coordinator came in with a folder and a careful smile. She explained my progress, my limitations, my options. Her language was smooth and professional. She spoke in complete sentences that left very little room for interruption. Then she said it. Given everything, we think it might be best if you don't return home just yet. I felt my shoulders tense. What do you mean? I asked. My daughter answered before the coordinator could. We've been talking about this, she said. It would be safer if you stayed with me for a while, or possibly somewhere with support services until you're fully stable. Somewhere. I looked at the coordinator. Is that required? I asked. She hesitated. Just long enough. It's not required, she said carefully, but it's strongly recommended. Recommended. The word felt heavier than it should have. I told them I wanted to go home. My daughter sighed, not loudly, but with the weight of someone preparing for resistance. Mom, your house has stairs, she said. Rugs. A bathtub that's difficult to get in and out of. You haven't been there in weeks. I know my house, I replied. She smiled tightly. That's what worries me. The coordinator flipped a page in her folder. We did conduct a preliminary safety review, she said. Based on family input, there are concerns. Family input. I felt something drop in my chest. What concerns? I asked. She listed them, each one small on its own. Difficulty with balance, risk of falling, medication management, living alone. I listened quietly. When she finished, I asked a simple question. Did anyone come to my house? The coordinator looked at my daughter. My daughter didn't answer right away. Not yet, she said, but we will. Will, as in already planned. I realized then that the meeting was not about deciding. It was about informing me of what had already been decided. After the coordinator left, my daughter sat across from me, folding her hands carefully. I've arranged for you to stay with me for now, she said. Just temporarily. Temporarily, the same word she had used before. I told her I wasn't leaving my home. Her jaw tightened. You can't just go back like nothing happened, she said. That's not responsible. Responsible. Another word that carried judgment without sounding like it. I told her I had lived in that house for over 40 years, that I knew every creak, every loose board, every shadow at night, that I had survived worse than a cracked rib. She leaned back in her chair. "This isn't about survival," she said. "It's about quality of life." Quality of life. I asked her whose quality she was talking about. She didn't answer. That afternoon, she drove me home anyway, not to my house, to hers. I watched the streets pass by through the car window, familiar turns missed, landmarks sliding by in the wrong order. I felt a quiet panic settle in my stomach, the kind that doesn't shout but tightens slowly. When we arrived, she parked and turned off the engine. "I brought some of your things," she said, gesturing to a suitcase in the back seat. I hadn't packed it. I asked her when she planned to take me home. "Soon," she said. "Once things settle." I followed her inside, my movements stiff, my chest tight. Her house was clean, controlled, neutral. No personal clutter, no history on the walls. She showed me a room at the end of the hall. "This will be yours for now," she said. For now. That night, I lay in an unfamiliar bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds. The refrigerator clicked differently. The floorboards did not creak where I expected them to. The darkness felt heavier. I thought of my own house, my chair by the window, the kitchen light I always left on low at night, the sound of the wind moving through the trees outside my bedroom. I realized I did not know when I would see it again. The next morning, I asked for my keys. She hesitated. "I think it's better if we wait on that," she said. "Wait on what?" "On you being ready." That was the moment the word formed clearly in my mind. Eviction. Not the legal kind, the quiet kind. The kind that happens when access is delayed, when choices are narrowed, when temporary stretches into something shapeless and indefinite. I had not been forced out. I had been redirected. And sitting there at her kitchen table, sipping coffee I hadn't made, I understood that going home was no longer a simple decision. It had become something I would have to justify, and I had the unsettling sense that the longer I stayed silent, the harder it would be to reclaim what was already being treated as optional. My home, my independence, my place. The discovery did not come all at once. It came in pieces, the way truth often does when it has been carefully hidden behind good intentions. My daughter left the house early that morning. She said she had errands to run, appointments, things she didn't want to bore me with. She placed a glass of water on the counter beside my pills, lined up neatly in a plastic organizer I hadn't bought. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway before I moved. Her house was quiet in the way unfamiliar places are. Too quiet. Every sound I made felt borrowed. I walked slowly, my steps cautious, not because I was unsteady, but because I didn't want to announce myself to a house that was not mine. I told myself I was just looking for a book, something to read, something familiar. Her study was at the back of the house. The door was half open. Inside, everything was arranged with purpose. Files stacked, labels facing outward, a desk cleared except for a laptop, and a thick envelope propped against the wall. My name was written on it, not in handwriting, typed, clean, official. I stood there longer than I needed to, my heart beating harder with every second. I told myself it was probably nothing. Medical papers, discharge notes, copies of things I had already seen. I picked it up. Inside were documents I did not recognize. Bank statements. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The account numbers were unfamiliar. The balances were lower than they should have been. Then I saw my name again. Account holder. I sat down in the desk chair because my legs suddenly felt weak. There were transfers listed, small ones at first, labeled assistance, care coordination, household support. They were dating. Each one matched a moment I remembered. The week of my fall. The day I was admitted to rehabilitation. In the morning, she told me not to worry about bills. I flipped through the pages, my fingers trembling now. The amounts grew larger. I pulled my own purse onto my lap and opened it. My wallet, my folded papers, the notebook where I wrote down passwords and reminders. I logged into my bank account on her computer. I hesitated before typing. I had not used a computer that wasn't mine in years. The screen loaded slowly. When it did, I felt something cold spread through my chest. There were linked accounts I did not recognize. Authorized users. My daughter's name was there. So was another account listed under an entity name I had never seen before. I clicked on it. The connection was indirect. Money moved from my account to another, then to that one. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading, hoping my eyes were wrong. They weren't. I remembered her telling me she was organizing things, that she had moved money around temporarily to make it easier while I recovered. I remembered trusting her. I opened the thick envelope again. There was more. Copies of forms I had signed months earlier. The emergency authorization. The language is highlighted in yellow. In certain circumstances, I saw notes attached. Patients may struggle with complex financial decisions under stress. Family assisting with management. Assisting. That word felt suddenly dishonest. At the bottom of the stack was a document that made my breath catch. A consultation summary. It referenced legal advice, guardianship considerations, asset protection strategies, temporary housing arrangements. I closed the folder slowly and pressed my hands flat on the desk. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about my recovery. This was planned. I felt grief then, sharper than fear. Grief for the trust I had given so freely. Grief for the version of my daughter I believed I knew. Grief for myself, for not asking harder questions sooner. I gathered the papers carefully and placed them back exactly as I found them. I returned to the kitchen and sat at the table, staring at the surface until my tea went cold. When she came home that afternoon, I watched her hang up her coat, set down her keys, move through the house with the confidence of someone who believed everything was in order. I asked her one question. Where is my money going? She froze, just for a moment. Then she turned and smiled. What do you mean? She asked. I told her I had seen the accounts. The smile faded. She took a breath, slow and deliberate. I told you, she said. I've been managing things while you recover. You didn't want the stress. I asked her why she hadn't told me about the transfers. She folded her arms. "Because you would have worried," she said, "and worrying isn't good for you right now." I asked her about the legal consultation. She looked away. "That was just planning," she said, "in case something happened." "Something like what?" She didn't answer. I realized then that the discovery wasn't just financial. It was understanding that a version of me existed on paper that I did not recognize. A woman described as fragile, confused, dependent. A woman who needed decisions made for her. And that version was being used to justify actions I had never agreed to. That night, lying in the guest room again, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe around me. I knew then that this was no longer about going home. It was about reclaiming the truth. And I understood something else, something that made my chest tighten with resolve. She would not stop on her own. Not now, because people who believe they are protecting you rarely believe they are doing harm. And the longer I stayed silent, the more permanent this would become. I did not confront her right away. I needed the truth to settle inside me first, to harden into something steady. If I spoke too soon, it would come out as pleading or disbelief, and I could not afford either. I had already been framed as fragile, emotional, confused. So, I waited. That evening, she cooked dinner. The smell of onions and garlic filled the house, familiar and almost comforting. She moved easily around the kitchen, humming softly, as if nothing had shifted, as if the ground beneath us hadn't cracked open. We sat across from each other at the small dining table. She placed a plate in front of me and reminded me to eat slowly. "You need to keep your strength up," she said. I looked at her hands as she spoke, steady, confidence. These were the same hands I once held when she was small, crossing busy streets, afraid of getting lost. I finished my meal in silence. When she began clearing the dishes, I spoke. "I saw the documents in your office today," I said. Her back stiffened just slightly. "Which documents?" she asked, though we both knew. "The bank statements, the authorization forms, the legal notes." She turned around slowly. "You went through my things," she said. "No," I replied. "I went through mine." She set the plate down a little too hard. "You shouldn't have been snooping," she said. I asked her why my money was being moved without my knowledge. She rubbed her temples, the way she did when she felt inconvenienced. "Mom," she said, "I've explained this already. I'm handling things so you don't have to." "Handling things doesn't mean hiding them," I said. She sighed and pulled out a chair, sitting heavily. "You're overreacting," she said. "Everything I've done has been for your benefit." I asked her about the account with the unfamiliar name. She hesitated. "That's just a holding account," she said. "It's more efficient." "Efficient for whom?" Her eyes flashed. "Why are you interrogating me like this?" she asked. "I've been taking care of you. I rearranged my life for this." I asked her why she had consulted a lawyer about guardianship. That stopped her. For a moment, she said nothing. Her face changed, something tightening around her mouth. "I needed to know my options," she said finally, "in case things got worse." "Worse?" I asked. She stood up abruptly. "You fell," she snapped. "You broke a rib. You couldn't manage on your own. You were confused. You were overwhelmed. I was injured, I said, not incapable. She paced the room. You don't see it, she said. You forget things. You second-guess yourself. You blame yourself for everything. You're not as strong as you think you are. Her words landed like small, precise cuts. I asked her if she had told the doctors that. She didn't deny it. They needed the full picture, she said. The picture you painted, I replied. Her voice hardened. If I hadn't stepped in, decisions would have been delayed. Mistakes could have been made. Mistakes like what? She stopped pacing and looked at me. Like you insisting on going home and getting hurt again, she said. Like you mishandling money. Like you refusing help out of pride. I felt something steady rise inside me. This does not help, I said. This is control. She laughed once, sharp and humorless. You're being dramatic, she said. This is exactly why people worry about you. That sentence told me everything. I told her I had contacted the bank. Her face was drained of color. You did what? I told her I had requested a full review of my accounts, that I knew exactly what authority she had and what she didn't. Her hands trembled slightly before she clenched them. You can't just undo things like that, she said. Everything is in transition. Exactly, I said. She raised her voice then, just a little. You're making this adversarial, she said. We're family. Family does not remove someone piece by piece, I replied. She grabbed her coat from the chair. If you keep this up, she said, things will escalate. People will start asking questions. I looked at her calmly. I hope they do, I said. She froze, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. You're not thinking clearly, she said. And when this blows up, don't say I didn't try to protect you. She left the house without another word, the door closing harder than usual. I sat there long after the sound faded, my heart racing, my hands steady in my lap. The confrontation was over, and I knew with a certainty that surprised me that whatever came next would not be gentle. Because people who believe they are entitled to your life do not let go quietly, and I was no longer willing to disappear for the sake of peace. The truth did not come from my daughter. It came from people who had no reason to protect her version of events. 2 mornings after the confrontation, my phone rang before the sun was fully up. I was sitting at the small desk in the guest room, writing down everything I could remember. Dates, conversations, words that had felt harmless at the time but now carried weight. The caller introduced herself as a case manager from the rehabilitation center. Her voice was careful, professional, different from before. We're reviewing some documentation connected to your discharge and follow-up care, she said. There appear to be inconsistencies. Inconsistencies. I asked her to explain. She told me that during an internal review, notes had been flagged, statements attributed to me that did not match recorded observations, recommendations made without direct confirmation. I felt my chest tighten. She asked if I was aware that my daughter had submitted additional concerns after my discharge, concerns about my cognitive clarity, my ability to live independently, my financial judgment. I closed my eyes. Yes, I said, I am aware now. There was a pause on the line. "Have you been evaluated for cognitive impairment?" she asked. "No," I said. "I have not." Another pause. "That matters," she said quietly. Later that same day, my bank called. Not the branch manager I knew. Someone higher. They explained that my request for review had uncovered irregularities, not illegal yet, but concerning. Transfers made under broad authorization without clear documentation of consent for specific transactions. They asked if I wished to freeze secondary access. I said yes. My hands did not shake when I said it. That afternoon, I met with an attorney recommended by a friend I hadn't told the full story to until then. Saying it out loud felt like admitting failure, like confessing I had missed something obvious. The attorney listened without interrupting. He did not rush me. He did not finish my sentences. When I was done, he leaned back and folded his hands. "What you're describing is called preemptive incapacity framing," he said. I asked him to explain. "It's when someone builds a narrative early," he said. "Before anyone questions it, concern becomes record. Record becomes justification." He told me my daughter had contacted legal counsel weeks earlier, asked about guardianship, about timelines, about how authority could be transferred quickly if necessary. She hadn't filed anything, he said, but she had prepared. That word again. Prepared. I felt grief then, heavy and unfamiliar, not just for what she had done, but for the trust that had made it possible. The next call came from Adult Services. Someone had expressed concern about my well-being. The caseworker arrived 2 days later. She was younger than I expected, calm, observant. She asked me questions, simple ones at first, then more detailed, about my routine, my finances, my understanding of recent events. I answered slowly, carefully, honestly. I showed her the documents, the bank statements, the notes I had kept, the timeline I had written out in my own handwriting. She read everything. At the end, she looked up at me. "You are not confused," she said. "You are distressed by being excluded." The distinction mattered more than I expected. She told me her report would reflect that no further action would be taken against me, that concerns about my capacity were unsubstantiated. When she left, I stood at the front window and watched her car disappear down the street. The truth was no longer something my daughter controlled. It existed outside her voice, outside her interpretation. And once truth leaves the house, it does not return quietly. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. "We need to talk. Things are getting out of hand." Out of hand. I did not reply, because for the first time since this began, I understood something clearly. The danger had never been that I was weak. The danger was that someone I loved had decided my life was easier to manage without my consent. And now that decision was being undone, piece by piece, by the truth she never expected me to reach. The collapse did not look dramatic. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no final argument where everything was said out loud and resolved in a single moment. It came quietly, slowly, the way structures fail when the support underneath them is removed. My daughter did not come to the house after that. At first, I kept expecting her car to appear at the end of the driveway. I found myself listening for the sound of keys at the door, for the familiar rhythm of her footsteps in the hallway. Nothing came. The silence stretched. It was different from before. Before, her presence had filled the space, even when it felt heavy. Now there was an absence where authority used to sit. 3 days passed. Then my phone rang. It was her. Her voice sounded thinner than I remembered, less certain, as if she was speaking from somewhere unfamiliar. "Mom," she said, "we need to talk." I told her I was listening. She didn't begin with concern this time. She began with frustration. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she asked. "You've made people think I was trying to take advantage of you." I said nothing. "I've been getting calls," she continued, "from the hospital, from the bank, from people asking questions. Questions only matter when answers are missing," I said. There was a long pause. "I was just trying to help," she said finally. "Help does not erase someone," I replied. Her voice wavered. "I was scared," she said. "Everything was changing. Dad was sick. You were overwhelmed. I didn't know how to fix it." "Fixing does not require control," I said. Another pause. Then she said something smaller, quieter. "I didn't think you'd fight back. That was the collapse, not of systems or paperwork, but of the illusion that I would always yield." She had built her plan on one assumption, that I would remain quiet, that I would defer, that I would accept being managed in the name of care. And when that assumption failed, everything else followed. She did not threaten me again. She did not mention escalation. She did not speak of safety or preparation. She ended the call soon after, not angrily, not kindly, just defeated. That evening, I walked through my house slowly. I touched the door frames, the backs of chairs, the familiar edges of furniture that had held my life for decades. The house felt steady, not because nothing had happened, but because I was no longer being pushed out of it. I sat at the kitchen table as the light faded, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the clock. The danger had passed, not because she apologized, not because she understood, but because the truth had been strong enough to stand on its own. And once it did, everything built on silence had nowhere left to hide. The house is quiet now in a way it never was before. Not empty, not lonely, just settled. In the mornings, I sit at the small table by the window with a cup of tea and listen to the sounds I used to rush past. The kettle clicks as it cools. The clock on the wall keeps steady time. The distant hum of traffic reminds me the world is still moving, even when I choose to sit still. I am back in my own home. My keys are on the hook by the door where they have always been. My coat hangs where I can reach it. My chair by the window waits for me every afternoon, just as it did before all of this began. Nothing looks different, and yet everything is. I still think about my daughter. I don't know if that will ever stop. A mother doesn't erase a child just because trust was broken. But I no longer confuse love with surrender. I no longer believe that care requires silence. We have not repaired what was damaged. Not fully. Some things cannot be rushed back into place. Some things need distance to heal, and some may never return to what they were. I have accepted that. What I have not accepted is disappearing. When doctors speak now, they look at me. When decisions are made, my voice is part of them. When papers are signed, I read every word. I ask questions. I take my time. I am not difficult. I am present. That is the lesson this season of my life taught me, though it arrived in a way I never expected. Age does not cancel authority. Grief does not erase competence. And needing help does not mean giving up your place in your own story. If you are listening to this and something in it feels familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Confusion that comes from being excluded is not weakness. Self-doubt planted by someone else is not truth. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to remain visible. If my story helped you feel less alone, or gave words to something you have been carrying quietly, I'm glad you stayed with me until the end. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, told slowly and honestly, you can show your support by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. And if you know someone who might need to hear this, someone who is being spoken over or pushed aside in the name of care, consider sharing it with them. Sometimes, being seen is the first step back to yourself. And sometimes, finding your voice again is the most powerful act of justice there is.